Hey everybody, this is Todd, Hex Press, here with another episode of the RPG Gaming Chat. I'm here with some wonderful folks to talk RPGs and beyond. I will let them introduce themselves. Alan, since you are new to the podcast, why don't you go ahead and give an intro and drop any links you have in the chat. And then Andrew, you can go next, and then Rob, you can go last.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Todd. Everyone, my name is Alan Wortman, and I am the creator of an old school RPG called The Chronicles of Ember. It is the coolest and fuzziest RPG on the market today, as far as I know, and I think everyone should play it. There, can I do that little pitch? Is that all I got?
You could do more of a pitch if you want to, but that's fine. If you have, I don't know if you have any links, if you want to drop social media links or website, official, website links or Facebook group links or whatever you want, just throw them all.
Yeah, I'm digging them out right now.
All right, cool. Andrew, go for it.
Okay, Andrew Ragland. I'm line developer for the 1879 role-playing game from FASA. This is the steampunk replacement for Shadowrun in our product line. It is the direct sequel to Earthdawn in the same cosmology. So you have your meta races and so forth, various weirdness in a steampunk world. I have here there we go, get that to post. That is this week's blog entry for 1879, which went live about 30 minutes ago. This is the proposed list of NPCs for the second Personalities Dossier collection. We just finished locking down the last of the first set. They're all getting previewed in the blog. These are full dossiers on steampunk NPCs. It's 11 pages plus art, and they're $1.99 PDF. So that, this is the list that we're proposing for the second edition. Beyond that, I also do a Patreon project called Dynamic Balances. It's a much looser, more story-driven mechanic, a lot less crunchy than 1879. And I'll drop the links on that and let you go investigate that yourself. It's not released yet, so I'm not promoting it as hard. Over to you.
I am Robert Conley of Bat in the Attic Games, and I am known for writing about sandbox campaigns and hex crawl formatted settings. I have finished up releasing with under license from Judges Guild a series of revised edition of the 4 Wildlands book, as well as maps that accompany each of them. And I'm currently working on the Wild North, a follow-up to Black Marsh, and adjoins it. And you can see my stuff here, and you can get a little taste of what I'm doing with the Wild North, as well as see the rest of my blog.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for being here. And again, I'm Todd from Hex Press. I will drop a link to my Patreon, which basically just has links to all the different stuff that I do at the moment. So I'll throw that in there. So, Alan, you are new, and I know you were kind enough to send me Ember, which I will probably cover in a read-through in a video next week, I hope. But why don't you tell us all about Ember and how cool and fuzzy it is?
I'd love to. Ember is my take on the kind of game that I wanted to play. I started playing second edition Dungeons and Dragons when it was the latest and greatest back in 1991, I think it was. And I've just sort of followed through the iterations ever since. And I've played a little bit of everything along the way. But none of them ever really seemed right. There are always little bitty nits here and there that I wanted to pick at. And I decided that, well, now that I'm all grown up, I'm going to start picking. And I started writing down all these changes that I wanted to have happen. And the next thing you know, I panicked, and then there was a full book in front of me. And that was about a 10-year panic before I got everything lined out the way I wanted it to be. It was loads of fun to do that. There was loads of blood, sweat, and tears. But the game that came out of it was one that is now I would say people, when we were playing in our younger days, the sun was always shining. Everything was always wonderful. It was great weather, and you went out and you did the thing, and then you got the money and you killed the big bad and you went home. And someone asked me a question: why is the sun always shining? Why do we always have great weather? And I sort of capitalized on that. And now Ember is set in a world where an ice age is on the way. The average global temperatures hover around 0 degrees. At night, they can fall as low as 20 below or colder. And now you have the weather as one of your biggest adversaries. That's the thing that I've not seen done before, where you have to actually worry about a fierce environment that is actively trying to kill you, in addition to any monsters that are running around actively trying to kill you. And I started playing with other things. I wound up promptly removing just about all of the classic races, elves, dwarves, etc., and I brought them into. I brought in anthro races instead, and it it does put some people off because they see it and they think, "Oh, furries! I don't want to be involved in that." And well, I guess that's okay if that's your thing, but I really think you should give it a try. It's a D20 system, and let's see what else to say. The combat is the thing that I'm the proudest of. If you've ever played any other RPG or Dungeons and Dragons of any stripe, you are going to be instantly familiar with this. But the combat is where it shines, because I have managed to do away with the combat round altogether and speed things up to the point that if a fight lasts 15 seconds, that's a very long time and you're tired. Encounters can be over very, very quickly. And there's just a sort of brutality to it that I find a lot of people really gravitate toward. It's designed for the 18 and up crowd. I started this when I was in college. And I find that people really do seem to like this. I know I do. That anybody want to shoot me with some follow-up questions here, or?
Sure. So I really like the idea of it being in a sort of ice age environment or incoming ice age apocalypse environment.
Yeah.
How do you manage the weather effects? Do you use tables, or there's some kind of charts or some combo, or how do you run that?
Well, I could go through and make up a table or a combo, but I ask myself what's best for the story every time I do this. The weather effects are, the weather effects are what they are, right? You don't, you just kind of plan for how you want things to go, and whatever is going to put the biggest monkey wrench in your plans is probably what's going to wind up happening for just a little bit extra challenge. If you want to make up those tables, you can. There's some other resources from other systems for generating weather effects, and you're welcome to use those if you like. But I just kind of wing it.
Cool. As far as the effects, is it simply that if you're in it long enough, it'll kill you, or how do you? I guess does it impact everything, like navigation? If you're fighting outside, does that hamper you? What are the various effects that you have?
Okay,
that kind of thing.
Okay, one of the things that you have to worry about is personal body temperature. And if it gets too cold, you can start dealing with the effects of frostbite and hypothermia. Everybody knows that's bad whenever the monster rolls a natural 20 to hit you. But instead of having it do extra damage necessarily, in an environment like this, you're going to be carrying your water right next to your skin to keep it from turning into a rock, right? Well, what if that water gets hit? Okay, now you're in a negative 20 environment. You're in a fight. You're wet. This is not okay. And you can wind up with some severe effects there that you're going to have to... It's not a good day for you if you wind up wet here. What other effects? Well, you have to worry about going snowblind if you're traveling through... during the day. You have to worry about windburn, which is a wonderful thing. It's like sunburn, only much, much worse, because the cool air chills the skin and you don't realize just how badly you're being baked. And that also has effects that can wind up impacting your character in statistical ways and in story ways.
Awesome. I'm a big lover of weather and stuff, so it's great to see a really interesting kind of way of working weather into, all things. I assume that, what, do people live mostly underground, or is there a magic or technology that allows settlements to stay above freezing? How have the different creatures, the different races decided to or learned how to cope with this environment?
Well, the first thing that happened is the population of the world is not as big as it once was because things are dying off. There are actually some extinct races that are spoken of in literature that will be released soon, hopefully. The way that they tend to cope with things is they tend to pool their resources and gather around what little resources they can find to stave off the cold. You'll have people constantly burning things, huddling in. Geothermal centers are a great place for people to stick around. It's just a perpetual Siberian winter that these people are generally having to live with. So you do have people spending a lot of time inside, and if the temperature drops too far, you really don't need to be out there, because we'll get to you when in the spring thaw, if it ever comes.
Stumble upon your body like Utsi,
yeah.
How has magic evolved with the cold? So I guess one thing that I'm curious about, is this something that's happened over a fairly long stretch of time, or is this a sudden deep freeze?
It started with a sudden deep freeze in the storyline that we've got going. There was you have gods in the world, and then you have the things that used to be the gods before they lost that power, and then the gods were raised up to take over. Well, they want their power back, and guess what? You're not important. You are a resource to these things, and they're doing whatever they can to try to get their power back. And one of the things that wound up happening in the storyline was that one of these guys broke something that it would take a long time to get into, but it caused a sudden cold snap all over the world, and temperatures dropped by an average of, I'd say, 40 degrees Fahrenheit overnight, and they stayed there. And everybody just had to kind of deal with this. There was a massive shock. It totally upset the entire ecosystem, and a lot of people died as a result of it. We do have magic as a way to try to stave off this cold. And a little bit, everything that you can think of to try to survive such a horrible environment, I'm sure somebody's doing it.
But has, I guess, spells and stuff have not caught up yet to the cold. I guess I was just wondering if you have the magics become specialized in sort of anti-cold or cold countermeasures?
Yeah, there are, but how long can you keep doing that? One person who's able to do magic is not going to be able to keep everybody okay he has his limits. And the number of people who are able to access such things just can't keep pace with the population. So it's it's an interesting dynamic. Things got smaller whenever that happened.
I mean, sorry, go ahead.
You mentioned that you did away with combat rounds. How do you manage the flow of basically what people do and when?
Okay, the way that works is everything's on a cooldown system. Every action has a speed associated with it. For example, each weapon is going to have a particular speed depending on what size it is and what type it is. Spells are going to have another speed associated with them depending on their level and their complexity, and so on and so forth. And what happens is we add up all of your bonuses. You do roll an initiative die. You add up all of your speed. You add that to it, and that gets added to the current initiative count. Whenever we'll just talk about combat for a second. So let's say we all start combat at count 0. Well, if you have things, say a short sword that has a speed of 3, and your initiative die came up to you got very lucky and you rolled a 1, so that would be your total initiative would be 4. I begin counting at 0 and I work my way up. Whenever you hear your number, you alert me and say, "Hey, I got a 4." So then we would resolve your combat right there. And then as soon as you were done, you would roll another initiative at the tail end of that. And then you would add that to the current count. Let's say after your modifiers, you get just as lucky and you wind up with another 4. Well, on 8, it's your turn to go again. But you can also have people going simultaneously. And I've done a little bit of MMA in my life. Eastern European stuff. And it is entirely possible to have two people kill each other at the exact same time, and there's no clear winner. I mean, and I think that adds an interesting element to that. And that's ditto for spells, any actions you might undertake, or anything else you can think of, really.
Oh, so there sound like they're differences, but it's sort of like Hackmaster 5th edition and whatever their Wild West game. Forgot the name escapes me, but they have a similar system where you dice off for initiative, and that's the second that you start on, and then every action has a cooldown that once you execute it, it takes, you can't swing again until X seconds later, or cast a spell again until X seconds later. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, actually, I've never played Hackmaster, and 5th edition is just something barely touched on. So this was actually developed in a vacuum back, oh goodness, I'd say 7 or 8 years ago now. And I'm glad to know that other people had the same good idea.
Yeah. The basic edition, Kenterco sells the Hackmaster 5e basic edition for a very reasonable price. So you should check it out.
I don't think I'll have to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, the one thing I couldn't wrap my mind around until a lot later was, what happens, you swing your sword and say, like, they call it weapon speed, their cooldown factor. So you swing a sword if you have a weapon speed of 5. So if you swing it on second 5, you don't get to swing it on second 10. And I can never figure out, okay, what's this character doing for 5 seconds? Trying to visualize it. And then somebody explained to me, well, there's a kind of a difference between when you're engaged with somebody in combat and when you're not engaged. When you're not engaged, you're actually doing stuff every second, unless you do something like, fish something through your backpack, then you're tied up. But you actually move a little bit every second until you are engaged. And that's when the full system kicks in.
Right.
And then it made sense to me. So,
yeah,
but it's cool that you're doing it. I always wanted to give that kind of system a try myself for the stuff I work on.
Yeah, it's, what I use is something called ticks. It is like the tick of a clock. I don't do it in seconds. If you want to do the math on this, there are a combat round, air quotes and the finger quotes and whatnot, is 6 seconds long. And we call that a 10 count or 10 ticks. So each tick is 0.6 of a second, and we don't want to really bog you down with more math than you want to be doing at the time. But the only rule is that a weapon cannot go before the weapon goes. So if you have a weapon in each hand, and you wind up with 2 5s, you have 2 goes on 5, and your character has a bite attack, let's say, again on 5. Sure, you can execute all those at once, but under no circumstances can a weapon go twice on a single tick. So that separates that. And if you're really good at it, the better you get at this, the more total attack bonus you have. For every 4 points of it, it lowers your weapon speed or your initiative count by 1. So you can wind up with that great sword, which is just it's a huge mess. It does a lot of damage when it gets there, but you may well be dead before you can get that thing brought around. It's very slow. I think it has a speed of 12 before you start rolling dice and adding modifiers to it. We do have a character that has managed to get that down with extra skills and whatnot, and a whole lot of arcane number crunching. He's managed to get that thing down where it can go once every 5 counts if he rolls well. And that is, frankly, terrifying. Once every 3 seconds, he is able to bring that great sword to bear. That is terrifying. And I've never seen so much blood, man. He's he's really something to watch out for on the battlefield. Yeah,
that's cool. I like it. I think you also mentioned how you keep kind of combat short and sweet. What kind of tricks or what kind of techniques or mechanisms do you use to keep combat in the, passing by quickly and not taking too long?
Okay, well, again, let's say that let's have a little bitty quick game here. again, more finger quotes. Everybody's got their initiative. Let's say, Andrew, you've got a 5, Rob, you've got a 7, Todd, you've got a 3. All right. So I start counting 1, 2, 3. Okay. Then Todd, you let me know you have something going. Let's, go ahead, resolve that really quickly. You let me know, you tell me what armor class you hit. I'll let you know if I need any further information. So let's say you were successful. All right, fine. You did hit. All right, go ahead and roll damage. You roll. You wind up with 8 points of damage. I make note of that. And then 4, 5, Rob jumps in, but he's a little bit late. He wasn't paying attention. And 5, 6, 7, and then Andrew's like, oh, me. Okay, Andrew, you go. I was like, hey, I forgot. Oh, you need to roll again. You need to pay attention. If you miss your count, then I'm going to pass you because we don't want to go back. Now, I won't do this for new players because that tends to get kind of frustrating. I cannot talk today. I'm sorry. It gets a little frustrating, but it does keep things. It's like speed reading, but with combat. You never go back on a word. And everybody, you don't have dice towers. Everybody's seen dice towers. When your players are making dice towers, they're bored. They're not paying attention. They're just like, oh yeah, okay, well, wanting something to do. And with this, I have people hanging on the edge of their seat with their actions ready to go. And a combat that might take, that might take 20 minutes in another system, I can probably have resolved in 5.
So it's really all about, keeping that count, keeping those ticks moving. Mm-hmm. Compared to something like OSR, D&D or whatnot, do creatures have the same kind of hit points we're used to, or do you use kind of wounds and things to make them go down faster? Anything like that? Do you guys use morale and reactions and that kind of thing in there as well? See if creatures flee or surrender or whatnot.
Yeah, morale is a thing, and everything has its own morale. If I don't know what to do, I'll just go ahead and say it's got a morale of like 10, and we'll check on that for various things. Did it just have half its group get slaughtered? Did the leader get slaughtered? Standards for morale checks. You go ahead and you do those and see if they try to run away. If you do run away, oh, heaven help you, because then you've opened yourself up to an attack of opportunity, and everybody who has a threatening space around you gets a free shot at you. So that can also whittle things down really quickly. And what was the other question you had again? I'm sorry.
Oh, so yeah, just if hit points and things like that, do they keep to the kind of things we're used to, or do you go with wounds, or what's your health systems, and does that play into the combat speed at all?
Okay, well, everything has a range of hit points. Instead of let's say an orc has 8 hit points, something like that. In most systems, I think that's about right. Well, why would the orc be just 8 hit points? Do they stamp them out at 8 hit points? Probably not. You can have a range. And whenever I'm in the monster manual that I'm working on, and I'll get that out before the heat death of the universe, I promise. In the monster manual I'm working on, you can have encounters keyed to different strengths of the party, anywhere from weenie to paragon. And you have 5 different ranks there. So you can pick between, if I want to run this orc as a weenie encounter, he's going to have 4 hit points. He's not going to have any total attack bonus. Just whatever he rolls on the die is going to be what he gets. And he's going to have a damage bonus and et cetera. That's going to be just for him. But you have all 5 stat blocks right there. Really, really small 1-line stat blocks that you can interpolate between to actually tune the encounter to the party. So if you start off with something that is higher level than this is a hero level orc, we'll try this. And you see that this hero level orc is taking long strips of hide off people, and this is not going to go well. There's no fun quite like a total party wipeout. So you want to give them a challenge. You don't want to send them off to their execution. So you can go ahead and you can surreptitiously bump him down a little bit, and you've got all the information right there as well. The numbers are going to balance out to about what you're used to. But the combat damage can get really outrageous. And in the case of critical hits, this is another thing that makes things ugly and faster. I'm sorry. Again, frog on the throat here. if you roll if you roll a sufficient number on your d20 to hit the creature, then you've done a normal hit and you resolve normal damage. If, however, you have, with all of your bonuses, a total attack roll that exceeds 20, then that's double damage. If it adds up to 30 or more, that's triple damage. If you roll a natural 20, that's another multiplier. If you're charging, that's an additional multiplier. So, and there are some weapons that when they crit for multiples of damage as well. So I believe the most obscene thing that I've ever seen was a 6 times crit. So you just add up all your damage and apply a multiplier to the end of it. And with that, with that 2 that he rolled on a D8 for damage, I think he wound up doing something like 68 points of damage, 70 points of damage to this poor creature. Because combat is wild and crazy, and I've never seen a plan survive the first few seconds. It's glorious. I love it.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you.
So tell me a little bit about the furry races, the anthro races. What are the main ones? Okay,
well, there are a lot of races here. I believe we're up to 18 on this, and that's what's in the player's guide. I actually have more that I'm not willing to release, because whenever you do stuff like this, there's always something that winds up on the cutting room floor, and a big book is expensive to produce. And nobody's going to buy your book if they have to pay, $150 for this coffee table sized, tome. So we start with the anthro races. You have your canine people. You have your called kobolds. My kobolds are not these little lizard-like things with doggish faces. They're the actual, werewolf-like kobolds from Japanese legend and literature. You have, going through them here, you have the cat-like Jaka, the bunny-like Lugan, minotaurs, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, a honey badger race called the Rotan, a Naga-type race called the Salah, and they're cold-blooded in this. Their life is awful. It is absolutely awful.
I was going to say, that doesn't seem like a good environment for a cold-blooded species.
Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful. They've got to have like magical tattoos or have some magic item or something on them to be up here, because there's reasons for them to do that. They originally come from a geothermally rich archipelago. And the waters are warm and everything's nice. But if they get up here, things can go, so wrong so quickly. And they run the risk of, if they get too cold, they lapse into brumation and they shut down. And if they've got food in their belly, they stop digesting it. So it starts to rot in their stomachs. So then they have a whole new kind of trouble that they've got to deal with. And it's amazing. People are so curious as to trouble. You tell somebody they're in trouble, they don't run away. They ask what you mean, or they, let's try to solve this. I love it. We also have the bear-like Ursa and the otter-like waterfolk. They're that rounds out all the furry races, and we have several humanoid races as well.
Are the furry races or the anthro races, are they sort of 2 legs, 4 legs?
Well, yeah, they're all on 2 legs. They're all on 2, except for the Selah, who have no legs to speak of. They have no legs at all. They're all bipedal, and they come in a variety of heights and weights. Your Lugan, the bunny-like people, they top at about, I'd say 5 feet tall, and they're going to be somewhere around 130 pounds. The Ursa can be up to 8 feet tall, and they can tip the scales at closer to 700 pounds. So you have a wide variety of sizes here.
Nice. I watched the show His Dark Materials on HBO, which was based, I think, on the same books as that movie from a while back, The Golden Compass. But they have a polar bear race, which is interesting because they're not really anthropomorphized. They're basically big polar bears walking on all 4 doing polar bear things, but they obviously are intelligent. They can talk, and I think they're supposed to be great blacksmiths. So I couldn't really figure out, and they don't show on the show how they use their paws, because they don't have. They
have opposable thumbs.
Oh, do they?
If you look closely, they have opposable thumbs.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I did not look that closely, but I was about to say, because they show them like doing stuff. I'm like, how are they making armor and all this stuff if they're just with their paws? But having opposable thumbs.
Watch the scene in the throne room. Okay, wait a minute. I can't tell you about it. It's a spoiler.
Oh no, I watched the whole. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I've watched the whole thing, but yes, I'll check out.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil for other people. There's a scene where it becomes really obvious.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry, I butted in here.
No, that's fine.
No, totally good. Is there anything else of Ember that you think is? We talked about the weather. We talked about the species. Now we've talked about the combat. Is there anything else that you would say is a main thing of Ember that as potential Ember players or GMs or whatever that think is a real important thing about the system and the setting to know?
Well, one thing that I would say is important to know is that I currently have 5 different magic systems that all interoperate. I know that sounds horrifying. But all of these things can go in, and they do mesh together really well as a system that allows you to make up your own spells on the fly if you decide to go that way. You have your standard cookbook mage, which is the one we're all used to. He has his book of formula, and he goes through these with these equations that he solves the universe for, and he gets the effect he wants. He has to study his spells, and he can do wonderful things, but it takes a lot of time. Then you have your divine magic, which is, well, I'm not doing this. I'm just a channel and a conduit for power from elsewhere, and that flows through me and out into the world, and it's up to me to make sure that it works the way that the gods want it to work. You have an old system of magic called rune casting, whereby there are little glyphs of power that you can, with a certain mineral, inscribe either in the air or on objects to produce an effect. And these are not subtle, where you might have a cookbook mage making something really nice and flowery, like Burning Hands or Flame Bolt or some other such spell. A person that is a rune caster merely casts fire, and he will run you over with a dump truck with this. There's no grace. There's no subtlety. It's intended to be extremely powerful, but limited in its own way. And then we get to mentalist magic, which is my fix for psionics. That's around. And then we get, finally we come to the putting magic together and doing your own spells on the fly. Instead of relying on these formula or appealing to another power, the way the world is, the way the cosmology is structured, I'm using the Great Ring system, where you have your 4 elemental planes and then your positive and negative material planes, and everything interacts to give you something like 18 planes to pull from. And the way Ember is kept alive is that all of this energy has to flow into Ember to make things to make things keep on keeping on. An arcanist, the person that actually pulls on this directly, can choose a primary node from this, and he can begin pulling from. He does have some restrictions depending on what he picks, but he can pull and drag that force directly in and channel it and shape it on the fly. And depending on how many levels he has, that's how many augmentations he can make to the base statistics for a given spell. And you don't have things like, you don't have confusing terminology like spell level. You have, your level is the level of spell that you can cast up to. If you're 5th level, you take these base dimensions for a spell, and you can augment them up to 5 times with either range, damage die, or any combination of those. My 3rd level's fireball may look completely different than your 3rd level fireball. I may do 1d6 points of damage 5 feet away, or 1 point of damage 1d6 points of damage 30 feet away, and you may do 3d6 points of damage 5 feet away. And again, you can tune this on the fly to however you want, or however you feel the situation demands.
Do you usually run your groups that have a mix of these, or is it in a particular group you feel like there's maybe 1 or 2 of those magic systems that are in play at the same time?
Oh, I let them run whatever it is that they want to run, whatever they're comfortable with. Usually we wind up with people loving the Arcanist, and we're going to have some type of healer. And he's going to be a divine caster. And then I've had, I think, 3 different systems in play at the same time. They all work. They all have their trade-offs. And that's what I want to do. I want to give you, here's all this choice. You pick what you want to do. Here are your consequences for your choices. And if somebody else wants to play the game and wants to run this game and they don't like any of that, well, pick one. It's entirely up to you.
Do you find they're easy enough as a GM to be able to bounce between them easily?
Well, it's easy for me. My players, they tend, depending on their skill levels and their familiarity with the system, they may or may not be too comfortable with Arcanism right out of the gate because it's the most complex of the systems, but it gives you the most freedom. I let people just pick what they want. Yeah.
Awesome. I really like those systems when you can make your own spells on the fly. I think the one I always come back to is Barbarians of Lemuria. Had a cool magic system like that, and I always appreciated it. Andrew, you're up. You got a topic to talk about?
Before the show, we were talking about cricket. Now, 1879 is a steampunk game. It's kind of a little maybe past the peak of the British Empire where things are starting to get really shaky. Part of the premise of the game, and I'm laying a little foundation here, give me just a second. Part of the premise of the game is that a portal got cracked open in the middle of Greenwich Park in 1877. This led a flood of mana through from a higher mana world that became known as the Grosvenor world after Professor Grosvenor, who accidentally cracked open the portal, or maybe he actually meant to, but nobody can ask him because he kind of disappeared along with all of his equipment when the portal popped open. Nobody knows what happened to him. In the Grosvenor world, and this is a stable wormhole going back and forth between Greenwich Park and this other world. So, of course, the Brits run rail through it and start colonizing because this is the British Empire. It's a colonialist empire. It's what they do. They run headlong into these people called the Somsut, and the Somsut hate the British on sight, and the British cannot abide the existence of the Somsut for a variety of reasons. They start shooting at each other, so now we're at war in another world. The Somsut have weird science technology that gives them battery-powered zombies. Let me just let that one hang out there for a second.
I was going to say, what happens when their batteries run out?
It falls down, and it's a dead body with a couple of little bits of weird science tech stuck in it.
So you're saying it's more like Frankenstein than undead, so to speak.
Oh, very much so. These are drones. What we have done is taken the Shadowrun rigor and looked at a particular episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine and gone, we could do that. It's kind of gross and unsettling, but it fits with the Somsut culture. They collect the dead at the end of a battle and install tech in them and use them as shock troops in the next fight. Waste not, want not.
Makes sense. Gives me that Chronicles of Riddick Necromonger vibe, if you saw that movie.
Oh, yeah, we are really leaning into the necropunk with the Somsut. They have animated skeletons doing the scut work in their cities. Instead of the old grannies sweeping the sidewalks, there's animated skeletons doing taking care of the rubbish in the gutter. This is just average life for the Somsut. You grow up seeing this. So yeah, we're leaning into the necropunk there. The Somsut cannot abide the existence of the British because the British use all sorts of ecologically destructive technology. The Somsut live in a very delicate ecological balance. This is one of the reasons why they reuse their dead. And so, yeah, they're at war. Fort Wellington is the frontline military holding of the British across the trenches from Maksudam Matam, which is the frontline Somsut fortification. Right now, it's still a border war with just one big fort on either side. Neither side has really brought up their heavy armies yet. There's still a lot of mobilization happening. And so every now and then, the two forts will try to shell each other. So let me give you the Fort Wellington rules for cricket.
Oh, God.
Play to commence at 1400 hours. Play to be continuous except by interference by air raids until 1800 hours. Play will not cease during shell fire. All players will supply own beer. Rum issue is being arranged by the team managers. Umpires will wear white coats if available and will carry loaded rifle with fixed bayonets. I mean, okay, we're sort of, going a little hardcore here, right?
Yeah.
Unbiased umpires preferred, but these may be changed if things are going against the team concerned. Remarks to umpires on receipt of adverse decisions to be confined to those words used during dive bomber attacks. All players will be searched for concealed weapons before start of play. All weapons found other than ST grenades, Mills bombs, and revolvers will be confiscated. This does not apply to umpires. All right, play ball.
Out of curiosity, is this based on any historical cricket rules for British places that were in similar situations, or was this totally
absolutely
imagination?
What I have just read to you is almost word for word lifted from a memorandum of July 30th, 1941, for a match between the Australians and the British at Tobruk.
Makes perfect sense then.
And I found this and went, oh my God, I have to use this. Now, talk about killing your darlings. These cricket rules have been standing by the punch bowl with an empty dance card all evening. I have yet to find a place for them. I think I may be able to get them into the Fort Alice source book, which is currently in draft. And I'm really trying to get this in to get some of the flavor of what is the culture like under these conditions? How are these people keeping a stiff upper lip and keeping on? And it's gotten all sorts of interesting. The frontier of the Grosvenor world is a very violent and weird and strange place. One of the things about 1879 that we decided early on was that we were going to keep the dials normally set at about 6.5. We've got the steampunk dial at 6.5. So we have advanced technology, we have analytical engines, so we have clockwork computing, and there's your Decker, if you like playing a Decker or Matrix Hacker or whatever you want to call them. You've got these guys who are experts in clockwork and telegraphy and analytical engines. Big clockwork mainframes. Lots of fun. We have the weirdness dial set about 6.5 usually, which gives us your meta races. The ones you would have seen in Shadowrun. You've got dwarves, elves, orcs, except we call them snarks because of the Lewis Carroll reference, and trolls. And collectively, instead of the meta races, they are known as boojums. And thus, every snark is a boojum, to complete the reference.
You mentioned that in your world, the dead are actually pressed into service as tools, basically. Were you influenced at all by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman's Deathgate cycle on that? Because it's reminding me of wonderful stories that took place in that little 7-book series.
I have not read that series. And At this point, I think I may put it on the blacklist because I don't want to accidentally lift from it if it's that close.
Well, there's one section that they they do explore a world where the dead are reused, and it's a very similar to that. They would fight armies with old dead or new dead, depending on how badly they wanted to. And it was well, I mean, if you want to blacklist, hey, that's you.
It sounds like a sort of thing that I would really like to read, but I'm really cautious about unconsciously lifting. I try not to do that.
I totally understand.
There's a few, so
I'm guilty too.
To delve a little further into the Samsut, they have a concept of life debt. They understand mana through their weird science technology. What they basically have are gigantic mana accumulators at the center of each of their city-states. Their city-states are always circular, with the main wall at the perimeter of effect of their mana accumulator. Because that mana accumulator drains the mana field within that boundary. The meta races cannot exist in the Samsut city-states, which brings a whole new dynamic to their lands. We can get into that some other time. They have 3 castes: a peasant caste, a bourgeoisie workman craftsman professional caste, and then at the very top they have the immortal leaders, who are very rare. They are kind of serially immortal. They are given life boosts by mana-powered equipment on a regular basis. They are extremely hard to kill. They're almost immune to poisons. They heal incredibly fast. They can regenerate, but they have endurance limits. Eventually, you can wear them down. The way it works is you are born into life debt. Now, you don't become an immortal at birth. Even if you're born to an immortal, you're at best in the middle caste, and you have a life debt, an amount of mana that it took to grow the food that you will consume over your life, to produce the municipal services that you will consume over the course of your life. And your life debt is assessed against you. If you die still owing life debt, they come pick up your corpse and they put it to use, because you don't get out of your debt. Even in death, your corpse gets used to work off more of that debt.
Kind of Mr. Scrooge, right, in A Christmas Carol, the chains you forged in life, you got to pay off in death.
Very much so. It's an indenturement, and it is punching down, and the Samsut are an ugly culture once you start getting into them. But then the British at the time really aren't any better, and so, yeah, the two of them hate each other.
Because
that gives us, sometimes, yeah. This also allows us to have a miniatures game set in the same world. It uses the Universal 18 rules, which you also find in Demon World, and have been around for a little while. So, yeah, we have... you can wind up with British minis on one side and weird science priests with skeletons and zombies on the other side. Have all sorts of fun fielding your armies.
Do they play cricket with the Brits, or this is for how the Brits have to handle cricket? I guess what I'm saying is, are there any diplomatic and cultural relations between these two peoples, or is it just completely hostile?
Oh, it's complicated, as it usually is. The civilian government of the British Empire is really trying to get some sort of negotiations going. There have been language barriers. There was a language barrier at the very first, which resulted in the first casualty of the war. Unfortunately, it was one of the Amalekites, one of the immortal leaders, who was hit by a volley of gunfire from a British platoon. This after he was trying to get his assistant to explain to the British that these lands belong to the Samsut, but if you wanted to use them, we'll only charge you the rent of your dead. Give us your dead and you can have the land. And the British were like, the hell you say? And he got this sort of disgusted look, and he waved a hand. Now, he was sitting up on a throne, up on a platform with like 8 guys carrying it on poles. I mean, one of these really classic old, Cecil B. DeMille old movie Egyptian mock things. Kind of like the Pope being carried on the platform. And he makes a gesture, and his assistant reaches over and yanks the hood off of one of the guys carrying the poles, and the guy is obviously dead. Has been dead for several days. And the Brits lost their minds and opened fire on the guy.
With predictable results.
With absolutely predictable results. There was absolutely no forgiving the death of an immortal. That is, you just don't. So, yeah, the Samsut declared war. The Brits were like, let's go. And now the Prussians and the French are getting involved, and we're starting to see some Confederates showing up, marketing new technologies for the battlefield, and the occasional enterprising Deseret trying to market their copper, because everybody needs copper to make brass for your rifle rounds. We've had way too much fun with the alternate history. I've just thrown out a bunch of names that would open up all sorts of cans of worms. Anybody who know who the Deseret are?
I do not, but I'm keen to find out.
The Mormons. When the Mormons went out to Utah, they set up a nation that they called Deseret.
Deserets, yes.
And the Union Army marched in and knocked over their government and said, no, you belong to the Union. And the Mormons weren't happy about this. And then the Civil War started, and the Union had to pull a bunch of its forces out to go back east to fight the Civil War, and the Mormons got Deseret going again. And at the end of the Civil War, the Union rolled a weary but still functional army back in and said, all right, we had this discussion once, and took back over and went on and got Utah declared a state. But, this is sort of, in the 1879 universe, the war dragged on another year. It lasted all the way into the end of 1866 and ended with an armistice between the Union and the Confederacy, with both nations pretty much exhausted. And nobody ever went back out and reasserted any control over the Deseret. And by then, the Confederacy had extended them diplomatic recognition in return for access to cheap copper, which is one of the ways the Confederacy survived, is, they made a deal with the Mormons.
Getting back for a second to the immortal on the sedan chair carried by the dead, how do they deal with the smell of 4-day-old corpses carrying people around? I mean, surely, and people are programmed to yak whenever they smell large amounts of rotten meat and get away. How are they able to cope with the putrescine and the horrible other chemicals that are coming off these guys constantly?
Now we're into the important questions.
Oh, yeah. The British have no freaking idea. The British now all carry miasma masks. They're basically primitive gas masks designed to fend off the infectious miasma rolling off of these things. Remember, the miasma theory is still a thing.
Okay.
They believe evil vapors make you sick.
Well, those evil vapors will make you sick.
Oh, yeah. And there has been no explanation of how the Samsa just don't seem to freaking notice.
And it doesn't make them ill?
It doesn't seem to bother them. They don't see. It's like they're chemical workers or something and just don't have the ability to smell it anymore. Nobody's been able to figure it out. The British would dearly love to know this. If you can find out how it is the Samsat are able to put up with the stench Yeah, please tell us, that there's money to be made there. This could be weaponized. We could, maybe apply the treatment to our own troops.
And there's no disease running rampant because of all the because of all the dead people that they're moving around every day, and no rat problem.
No, which is another really weird thing. Why are the cities not plague pits? Where are all the carrion scavengers?
Because I'm seeing
Why don't we see these?
I'm seeing a scene right now where the immortal is being carried on this sedan chair by his bearers, and a crow just comes down while he's in the middle of a proclamation and relieves his left front tire of an eyeball it doesn't need any. That's amazing.
that could really actually be a thing, and they really wouldn't do a whole lot. Now, if several more crows showed up, all of a sudden they would all be dead on the ground.
Well, see, all you have to do with the Brits is now import crows and vultures and other things into that Grosvenor's world and let them loose on this cornucopia that would present itself to them.
Instead of falconers, you have buzzarders. Just send the buzzards in.
British Army buzzarders. I love it. I may have to steal that.
It's yours.
Let me throw one more thing in, because there's a third race involved. Neither the Brits nor the Samsut are native to the Grosvenor world. They're both originally from Earth, just the Samsut crossed about 3,000 years ago, about the time of the fall of Babylon, which is why their language is close enough to Akkadian that the Brits have managed to establish some degree of communication, largely by borrowing a few Jesuit scholars from the French, which is really galling the Anglican Church, let me tell you.
In accordance with the prophecy.
Indeed. The Saurids are the native race of the Grosvenor world, and they aren't real impressed with the Samsut or the Brits. They are a lizard-like people. They look suspiciously like the Tiskrang from Earth Dawn. If you've dealt with Earth Dawn before, which, by the way, is in its 4th edition. We celebrated its 25th year, I believe last year, Gen Con.
Congratulations.
We are coming up to the 40th anniversary of FASA this year, and so we are going to do a 40-year commemorative pin of the original FASA logo. Those will be a limited edition pin and should be available at Gen Con. So, the Saurids fought the Samsut to a standstill about 1,000 years ago, and they're not industrialized. The Brits mistake them for a primitive people like the Native Americans at first, and this is a serious error because the Saurids, first off, understand the magic of the world, and they are quite adept at spellcasting. Their shamans also are really good at summoning elementals. They just don't like to do it a lot because they understand that mana is a renewable but limited resource. You don't want to run it out. The trees start dying. They also are advanced in biotechnology. So they have things like rot bombs and rust grenades and all sorts of lovely things that they're starting to uncork against the British, and realizing that the Samsut have been roused up against the Brits.
Did you say rot bombs? Or did I miss
Effectively, what they have rot bombs. These are magical devices that, when chucked into the middle of a bunch of zombies, massively accelerates the processes of decay, including causing the various instars of insects to spawn at a greatly accelerated rate.
I would say nice, but
it's really kind of gross. But I warned you up front that we were leaning into the necropunk aspects of this, right?
Absolutely.
I did say that.
I do remember. I am taking notes.
This is also the late Victorian era, the end of the Industrial Revolution, and the beginning of the electrical age. So at some point, we're going to meet a young Nikola Tesla. He will never go to the Union and not meet Edison. He's being kept busy by the Prussian government. They declared him a national resource. And so he's busy designing the S-Bahn in Berlin right now. There's all sorts of stuff going on. You're not really seeing that many instances of FASA jaw anymore, and don't look that one up on an image search unless you've got a medical background. It's shall we say, one of the more picturesque industrial diseases of the Victorian era. I've had people tell me in the forums that the infection rules as written are absolutely brutal, and I said, yes, they are. Welcome to 1880. Joseph Lister just had this great idea about sterile procedure. Brand new idea. He's trying to get it to catch on. Yes. And there's a burgeoning little pharmaceutical industry based out of Burma, a firm called Eng On Tong. Their primary product, the name translates as 10,000 golden oils. It is a salve that is useful for a lot of things. The British Army discovered it, corrupted the native name as they tend to do in a sort of Hanklin-Janklin way, and called it Bankum. And it became wildly popular, and the British military medical establishment took notice of it, and it is now standard kit for the British Army. And if you recognize what this substance is, let me know. Mr. Aw, who owns the firm, has expanded it considerably. His people have been going into the Grosvenor world looking for new plants, looking for new medicines, and they have realized that the Saurids have antibiotics. And so the revolution in medicine that will save the British Army is going to come from a firm in Burma that makes, have you figured it out?
Not yet.
No, not
Tiger
yet.
Balm.
I'm sorry, what?
Ever hear Tiger Balm? Ever hear of Tiger Balm?
I have.
No bells.
Okay, this is a cultural thing. Tiger Balm is the unguent in Asia and a large chunk of the United States that's had Asian influence. It comes in two strengths, mild and strong. And if you've got a really nasty headache, a tiny dab of the strong on each temple and pop goes the weasel. It is gone. It is amazing stuff. It is also the driving force behind Haw Par Villa, which is Singapore's weirdest tourist attraction. It is a Buddhist sculpture park that for an extra $1.50, you can take a walk through the various levels of Buddhist hell. Parents take their kids to this place and walk them through this thing, going, see, this is what happens if you are disrespectful to your parents.
Good, clean, wholesome fun.
I kid you not. I have photographs. There are websites. And so the guy whose sons in our world, Mr. Aw's two sons founded the company that makes Tiger Balm, made a fortune, were extremely colorful characters, and built this park and gave it to the people of Singapore. In the game world, their father is the one who had the great success in medicine. And so we're looking at maybe playing a campaign where the characters are all employees of Eng On Tong. You are working in the Grosvenor world with the Saurids to bring these new native medications to market. This jungle is full of things that will eat you for a snack and move on looking for the next one.
This episode
There is a
Breakfast Club brought to you by Tiger Balm. Tiger Balm, good for what ails.
Indeed.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. You want to talk about critters? Let me just throw one critter out here. I realize I'm probably running up against my time limit here, but...
you're only cutting in on Rob, so take all the time you need.
One critter real quick. A thing called a Mordslanger. Mordslanger, it's a corruption of a German phrase meaning large murderer. It's a sort of insectoid creature. Kind of if you mashed 3 or 4 scorpions together laterally. It's got 3 tails. One of them's really wide. Too many legs. It's about the size of a VW Combi, and it's armor-plated. Small arms fire is absolutely pointless unless you can hit it in the eye. Good luck. The thing moves like greased lightning. The British military... Pardon?
Spray and pray. That's how you handle that.
Oh, yeah. The British military is using Vickers guns, which are the nice crew-served water-cooled MGs.
How about grape shot? Is that a thing?
Oh, absolutely. The smoothbore cannon loaded with grape shot is easy to get a hold of. They've been decommissioning these old smoothbore cannons and moving to rifled field pieces. So, yeah, you want a smoothbore cannon and some grape shot, just go requisition it. They might even send you an artillery crew with it.
That sounds nasty. Nasty indeed. All right, Rob. Let's well, there's still time. Oh, sorry, Andrew. Go ahead. Finish this one up, and then we'll go to Rob.
No. Go ahead, please. I've overrun.
So it's my turn to start.
It's your turn. Absolutely. You only have to, it's a hard follow-up when you got to follow Tiger Balm and a VW, car-sized scorpions. But let's see what you can do.
Okay. I don't think it's quite as exciting. So what I've been doing for the past couple of years is, I've been taking advantage of my Judges Guild license. And it started off in 2017, I redrew the map of City State of the Invincible Overlord and released it on drivethrurpg. But I also released a print product because drivethrurpg now has, for a while now, has 18-inch by 12-inch posters that you can get through their card printing facility. And then I released the revised edition of the 4 Waterlands guidebooks: Waterlands of High Fantasy, Fantastic Waterlands Beyond, Waterlands of the Magic Realm, and Waterlands of Fantastic Reach, all of them accompanied by a map product where I redrew the original Waterlands map. And this stems from the problems that Judges Guild have been having with their Kickstarter, and Bob Bledsaw gave me permission to get it into the backer's hand as well as the general public, some kind of, something for their trouble. So I gave them the backers and ACOT's version of the map. But so basically, and it doesn't, I keep eyes on who releases poster maps by searching, drivethrurpg, and I don't think a lot of publishers are aware that today if they want to offer a map with their products, they have the ability to do so now with drivethrurpg. And it's actually a little simpler and straightforward than the book printing side, which has this thing where you have to set up your PDF in a specific way, and then it has to go to an approval process, and sometimes they reject it for various arcane reason, and it can drag out. And you can master it, but it's a bit of a pain in the butt. And then you finally can order it, which takes a while. And with the card printing, though, you still have to, have the correct size, the correct what they call bleed, which is a little bit of extra margin that you put on to account for the fact that printing is never exact. It slides a bit, slides plus or minus a 1/16 of an inch around on the paper. So you need to add a little bit so that your image is always the important part of your image is always on the paper, and it's quite inexpensive. It's basically 48 cents a sheet, to the publisher.
How's the print quality?
It is excellent. I forgot to hold on 1 second.
While Rob's away, let's do another shout out to Tiger Balm. Tiger Balm, it's good for what ails you.
Guaranteed ale what cures you, I suppose.
That too. And
Okay.
Samsa zombie cleaning service.
Now with grape shot.
All right, Rob, go for it.
All right, I'll see if I can get an image here. Well, this has a picture of my lovely wife as well, but it is the image on the map on the far right is the one I got from drivethrurpg, and if you zoom in on it, you can see it's pretty good quality. Now, it doesn't come in one piece like that; it actually comes into 4 sections. But I used packing tape to join them all together because that's the only downside of printing poster maps through drivethrurpg. You are limited to 18 inches by 12 inches.
And that's Invincible Overlord, right?
Yeah, that's the City State and Invincible Overlord, and the one in the middle is the original released by Judges Guild. And then the one on the far left was the version released by Necromancer Game. So what you do when you have a map bigger than what drivethrurpg has is you make a separate layout in where you put a background equal to the color of your border. In my case, it was black. And then you just take a high resolution image and you put it on there, crop it to fit that, and then take the image again, go to the next page. Because when you upload the map file, the way it works is if you want to have 2 maps as part of your package, then you would load up what they call, you would load up a 4-page PDF, and with page 2 and 4 are blank. Okay? I guess because that's to represent the backside of the map, which they don't print on. And page 1 and 3 have the maps you want to print. So you can have them print 10 maps at once. It'll be a 20-page PDF. So my Waterlands map are all in 2 sections. So for the first 2 are 5 maps each. So when I enter in 2 halves, so I upload a 20-page PDF. And the only thing you got to do when you do that is make sure I recommend leaving at least a quarter-inch overlap, because when some people, when they take their maps and split it across most of the page, they try to get an exact join. And invariably, you always lose something in the printing process. Either it's in the fold of the book, if you're trying to split it across multiple pages in the book, or it's remember that 1/16 of an inch sliding around talking about, or it gets lost. So if somebody tries to join the 2 maps, there's a gap in there. Mm-hmm. So what you do, design your layout so you have a quarter inch. Now my maps, my Waterlands map has like a 2 or 3 inch overlap. So it's quite easy. I think it's quite easy for people to see, if they're on the western half and then they need to go to the eastern half to find out where they are on the eastern half of the map. And you can have, images that are completely different than one another as part of your map set. So I'm working on the Wild North that's coming out, and the centerpiece of that is it's the size of the Wildlands map of the area, but then I'm going to have some city maps, and because I've done this work, I wasn't planning on it at first, but I thought, because people like my Waterlands map, I'm going to do a color version of the original black and white map that I did. So I'm going to release that, and so I'll probably wind up having I'll need 2 maps for each, for the color and the black and white version. So that's 4 maps there. And then I'll design the city maps so they all are arranged on an 18 by 12 inch poster. And then if I need more, then I'll add another one. So there'll be a total of a maximum of 6 maps. And, it will cost, 6 maps is the base cost is $240. So I can offer those 4 maps together for something like $8, which is, not bad. But you can go higher if your product is, more intricate or costs more to make. Like say you have it's actually a map that's a full blown painting. So that those can be expensive to pay somebody to make. And so that's basically I wanted to talk to you about when I get here. That you not only have poster maps available, but you also have you can also get have drivethrurpg print on 8.5 by 11 cardstock. You can also have them print on. Oops, hold on. I had it up here. Card printing. I'll print the link right here. This is the printed card format and cost. You can print on 6x6 tiles, 8x10 tiles, which are like cardstock. Most of the people who've taken advantage of that are the people who make paper dioramas, and you cut them out and then fold them up and glue them together. But there's no reason why you can't use them for some kind of map work or illustrations, if that's your thing.
No, I didn't really think about that, but that's a good point. One question from maybe more of a logistics standpoint, and I don't. Can you mix book printing and card printing in one project? So if you had your wilderness map and then some kind of wilderness printed material, like a module or a settings guide or whatnot, could you have both of those in one project, or would you have to split them into two different products?
Well, yes, that's another downtime. You have to split them into two products. What happened to me was, so I started with the Sea-Stated Invincible Overlord, which was map only. So it kind of works just like a book in that you have a printed component, and then you can decide what you can have a PDF component. And of course, I offer a PDF version of the map, plus a few bit of extras that weren't printed, but you could get when you buy the PDF. And you can charge extra for the PDF, but I usually don't. So I remind people in my description, hey, make sure the PDF option's free. So if you buy print, make sure you select PDF plus print because it doesn't cost you any more. And then I did it pretty much the same way with the Waterland. I figured my map was going to be my primary. And I included a PDF of the guidebook with the map plus some extras. And then for the guidebook, I did include PDF there in case somebody wanted to use one of the other Waterlands maps or the original if they have them, just with the revised guidebook. So I included a PDF of the guidebook there and a few extras as well. And I wrote these big bold warnings. If all you want are the maps, just buy the map. Make sure you get the guidebook. And I didn't get bombarded with questions, but questions come periodically. And now that I've done this, I wouldn't do it the same way. So what I'm going to do for the Waterland, and this is the way I would recommend people doing it now, is that you go and if you have a combined book map project, make your primary project a book. So you have your printed book, you have your PDF and stuff, and any extras you throw on the book, okay? For the map, you offer to print, but you set the PDF either at a no cost or low cost, and you just offer like a note in there saying, hey, if you want all the PDF stuff, go to my book. This is just so you can order the print map. And I think it would be a lot less confusion that way. But I will come back to you in a couple months and report how that went. But that's my current thought. And because it is a complex, you can't even put them on the same order. They have to do two separate orders.
Oh, really? Because the other thing I was going to say is, could you do them as a bundle where you have two things and you don't really offer them, or maybe you do offer them separately just for kicks, and then just put them together and say, hey, buy the bundle that's two products, products one, the rule book, and then, or whatever, the printed book, and one, the printed map. But it sounds like you can't do that either.
No, you have to make two. You can't mix card orders with books orders when it comes to print. So you have to do it. Now you can make, like I have a bundle for all my Waterlands map and a separate bundle for all my guidebooks, printed guidebooks. And basically I operate, if you buy all four, you get one free. So,
Out of curiosity, have you checked out Lulu or any of the other printing services? Do they have easier ways to do that, or is drive-thru the only game in town when it comes to doing both book printing and card printing?
Drive-thru is the only game in town. Everybody else is just, when it comes to posters, they're expensive as all hell.
Gotcha. I'm curious, maybe down the line.
Now, if you're willing to do the shipping and handling yourself, there are places you can go to. If you're willing to spend the capital to do a print run, there are options there. But if you want the ease of the storefront of a Lulu drive-thru RPG style storefront, where you just post things and they handle all the commerce stuff, the drive-thru is the only game in town when it comes to book and poster.
Yeah, that makes sense, unfortunately. But maybe there'll be enough, you're getting their things get going, and maybe some other people will see what's happening with that, and maybe it'll get their act together as far as being able to combine these things. Because I don't know why they would keep them super separate on their back end, but it could just be legacy.
Well, because one is a special process. One ties into a special process they set up with Lightning Source, and apparently they were very picky about that. They had to go through a lot of logistics to get this working with Lightning Source. The card, my impression is that they own the printers. Somewhere in Georgia, which I think is where their office is, they have a building with these printers and they handle all the orders. So that's why they have to have for some reason behind the scenes, their distribution system has to funnel it two different ways.
Gotcha. Well, I guess that makes sense. They have their own relationships and systems that they can't easily update, but at least you can do it through one vendor, which I guess is nice, and not have to have two completely separate things.
And I got to say, the 48-cent price per sheet, I don't see nobody else touches that as far as print on demand goes.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
And also, just to point out, they do have, they also check out for RPG guys, check out the cards. So if you want to, like, say you have a game and you want to offer a deck of equipment, you can do that easily. It's like if you want to make them U.S. bridge size, then or poker size, which is 2.5 inches by 3.5 inch, you're looking at 9 cents a card on low print orders.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking about trying to make some kind of, I don't know, tarot style decks, but I'm terrible on the art side.
2 3/4 inches by 4 3/4 inches, which I believe is tarot size.
Yeah, for me, it's about figuring out how to do the art because I am not that artistic.
Well, they don't help with that, except for having they have stock art that you can browse, and hopefully some of it will fit what you want to do.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check it out. How's the experience been? Are a lot of people interested in the old Judges Guild stuff? I mean, I kind of hype that stuff up every chance I get as far as being good material.
It boosts my sales up by an order of magnitude. I make if I don't have a new release, I'll make $300 or $400 a month, which is far better than I was doing before.
Nice. I'm glad those they continue to be worthwhile because they're really great things. There's nothing quite like the City of the Invincible Overlords, just as far as a location. I mean, maybe there is, and I haven't heard of it, but it just from just all the wild and crazy stuff to having all the detail that's into it. I don't know anything else that really, I guess, scratches that same itch that I've come across.
No, I mean, it's first of all, it's an expansive setting. It's the size of, when you put all the map together, it's an area of land the size equal to Western Europe. And it has very little high-level details. So if you have a different idea about how your kingdoms and empires go, there's not too many toes you're going to be stomping on in order to make that happen. And but when it comes to saying, okay, what's in this area, what in this area, there's a ton of small detail that provides a structure for coming up with, that you can see, oh, here's a lair of were-tigers, here's a lair of orcs, and here's a lair of ogatas, Okay, so, what's in the area, and that can serve as a great inspiration point. And not only that, it's just, so comprehensive. Like I said, it's an area, this detail is spread out in an area of the size of Western Europe. So, but it can be overwhelming, which is why, and I'm going to toot my own horn here, which is why I created and released my Black Marsh setting for free, which you can download. The print isn't free, but I think I have the print cost at a very reasonable amount at $5.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, they got all those tables and ways to generate content on the fly. I really wish someone would go through and reorganize and maybe spruce up the ready reference sheets because... Well,
that's another thing about the guidebooks. I do, not for everything, but I do, especially the last two guidebooks, I reorganized the table. The Waterlands of the Magic Realm has mostly water rules and water encounters. So I went through all the ready ref sheets, took all the water-related stuff, reformatted nicely, and added a little bit of stuff I needed so I can call it Swords and Wizardry compatible, and made sure I didn't copy anything that wasn't in the D20 SRD. It's not D20, but, that's the open content. I can't copy stuff out of the old book. So there were a few things I had to act because of that. Like there was one place where Judges Guild had a Morkoth. Well, there's no open content monster called Morkoth, which is a sea beast that lives at the bottom of a whirlpool and has psionic powers that lure sailors to their death. And
sounds like a good time.
So I had to substitute it for an obelisk. I decided to substitute that creature for an obelisk, which has the same weird vibe and is a water-based creature. Not the same, but you do what you can.
Is that covered by the OGL? Aboleths or?
Yeah, actually it is.
I need to go and look at the full list of that because I always end up scratching my head trying to figure out what monsters I can use.
Or just go to the D20 SRD and they have it nicely summarized on a website, so you don't have to wade through oodles of text. So you can look at their lists and see what's there.
Ah, cool. I'll have to bookmark that.
Okay, and then the last book, The Waterlands of the Fantastic Reach, I went through all the castle rules and all the domain rules that they have, and reorganized them, clarified them in a few places. Didn't change them, but I clarified it. It wasn't as tightly written as it could have been, and printed all that. So that gives a Judges Guild framework. That's Judges Guild framework for carving out your own realm and running it, building castles and stuff like that. So all that is in the Fantastic Reach.
Okay, I was going to ask which source book that's in. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm a big fan of all the old Judges Guild stuff. I think the only one I don't have all the original books. I don't have what was the name of the one where it's kind of you're going through the sewers to kind of sneak back into the. I think it's the last one with the operation. There you go. Yeah, I don't have that one. I think I have most of the other ones.
It's not quite as evocative because it's one of the later Judges Guild work, but it dovetails nicely. I mean, I got a lot of use out of Wraith Overlord. The whole idea that there's sewers to crawl around was a pretty cool one.
Yeah, and it's such it's one of those tropes, right? Those fantasy city tropes is what's going on beneath the city and the sewers and all that. So you get that. So I'll have to try to find it, or maybe I don't know if you can even print it off drive-thru or whatnot, but I'll have to get a hold of it at some point.
That's the other thing you got to remember about Wraith Overlord. It's not about the sewers too; it's about the basements of many of the buildings. So you get the details like the city jail or the 3 temples that are in the center of the city-state. So it actually expands the city-state as a whole, other than just providing an underground sewer lair.
See, now you're selling me on it again. But every time I've looked, I haven't had an easy time finding it. I'll have to just try to get lucky at some point. Maybe is that one that they have up on drive-thru just digitally?
Actually, I do think so. I can find it quickly, but it's actually in the 90s. After I never cared for Vampire the Masquerade, but I thought it was one of the best damn monster manuals for vampires ever produced. So I used it. I adapted it as such, and
holy cow!
I had a clan of Nosferatu living in the sewers. That was an important part of one of my campaigns.
Nice. Not only is Wraith Overlord on drive-thru, it is currently on sale.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, half off from 12 down to $6. $6.
Well, I would get it done.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go through it right now while I'm listening. I'd put out the call. Oh, so Rob, anything else you want to talk about before I don't know how many questions or if people have questions about anything. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I would just briefly mention, I've got done with my first draft for the Wild North. I originally wrote it as a map for the Waterlands back when Fight On magazine was still being released, but for a variety of reasons, I decided to adapt it to Black Marsh. So it sits to the north of Black Marsh. And what it is basically I was inspired by GURPS Russia, because, GURPS made great historical source books. And so I read up on the myths and mythology of Russia. So I came, just like Gygax was inspired in part by the myth of medieval Europe to create, like Greyhawk and the D&D thing. I was inspired by the myth of Russia to create a fantasy version. It's not historical, but it definitely has themes from Russia. And the basic premise of the setting is that 1,000 years ago, it was like an ice age setting, much like the world that Alan described, except 1,000 years ago, the glaciers started melting and retreating. And in its wake came all the post-Ice Age landscapes like bogs and taiga, and in some areas steppes. And then this race of people, a culture of humans called the Sorob, the elk hunters, came in. And then a few hundred years after they arrived, Vikings arrived from the south. And they landed and they conquered the Sorob. Some of the Sorobs fled deeper into the wild north, while the remaining ones intermarried with the Vikings to form the Ruasin, which is my version of. And the Wild North is about the Ruasin and their troubles and the mundane and fantastic threats that they face. For example, I have one of the major antagonists of the region is an undead lich named Kostai the Undying, and he's not his motivation is not your typical megalomania, unless I want to conquer the world and turn it into my undead paradise. Instead, what he does is he goes around, kidnaps maidens because he's searching for his reincarnated long-lost love. But unfortunately, he never finds them, and the unfortunate maiden who gets into his power is turned into a zombie. And if you go to the heart of his realm, in the area where he has, you'll find that he has a tower, and there are like thousands of undead, because he's been at this a while, all zombies who are former maidens that he kidnapped.
So sort of a Dracula meets Lopan from Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah, a little bit more. The Russians kind of portrayed him as more comedic than that, but it's he's definitely people don't like him. Let's just say they really wish he was gone.
I can't imagine why that would be if they're taking all their daughters and turning them into zombies.
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of stuff that's related to that, remnants of his past encounters, and there are several factions of Ruasin, of the Ruasins, and one of them is considered evil by both. They're called the Sons of Aden, and there's one area where you find a whole bunch of dead Sons of Aden forces and the remains of a mechanical construct that Kostai constructed, because and the whole battle was resolved because Kostai thought the leader of the Sons of Aden in this area, daughter, was one of his long lost, and she was trying to grab him. They were having none of it. And his plot to get her this time was to build a mechanical spider, kind of like in the Wild Wild West movie. And it didn't work out so well.
But I like the idea of the mechanical spider. I don't know if you ever saw that. This has nothing to do with anything, but there was a really great documentary on I think it's called The Death of Superman, about the what's his name, Tim Burton's never to be completed Superman movie with Nicolas Cage.
Oh yeah, that was a mechanical spider.
Well, what happened was the guy who was the producer on that movie was just all about these like giant spider things, and it's funny because you watch him in the documentary, and he's and listen to people, and he was trying to get this spider thing into Superman, and it turned out that what happened was when that movie died, he ended up producing Wild Wild West and threw his mechanical spider in the end of it. So he went from the Superman movie, which he ended up not backing, to backing that giant disaster of a movie. Thing. Yeah. So he lost his shirt. I don't know if he lost his shirt, but ended up backing that big bomb. But he did get his giant spider into the mix.
I really hope he lost his shirt. That movie had such potential, and then he just set it on fire.
Yeah. When you see him in the doc, he still seems to be living large and really smug. So I guess he recovered nicely.
Of course, there is no justice.
Yeah,
I mean, this is a guy who should have like shame tattooed across his forehead or something. Oh my God, that was potential. Pardon me, being a steampunk writer, I take this one personally.
No, I totally understand. It was an abomination, but just making me think about that.
Oh yeah.
And if anyone has questions, anybody in here want to throw them in the chat? Open to them. If anybody else has anything that they want to riff on real quick, we've got 15 minutes still left. Throw it out there. It's open mic for anybody any of the hosts to jump in and say something about steampunk, Wild Wild West, giant spiders, Tiger Balm, anything at all.
Hey, that is our sponsor this hour. And now, page 2. If we're going to do the Paul Harvey thing.
Exactly.
Human.
Any questions, folks?
Lordy. Yeah, please. Otherwise, we're going to get scared of the dead air and start riffing.
And hey, if I don't have an answer, I'll just make something up. Oh, okay.
Alan, question for you.
Yes. Missed most of my speech. Ember sounds very much like a post-apocalyptic setting in the Dark Souls style. Well, yeah, it can be. If that's the way that you like to play. The way that we're doing things, it's exactly like that. You're absolutely Norash, did I get your name right? It's all about you versus the environment, you versus the world. And the world it's not really out to get you so much as that it just doesn't care about you, and you want to survive however you can. The first obligation of every organism is to survive, and this just makes it harder. So there's a lot of really good stories to be told there, and you really didn't miss a whole lot with my speech. There was a whole lot of stuttering and not really being awake and trying to stumble through, but I did the best that I could with my limited resources. But my brain's actually hot now, and I'm up and running at full speed right here toward the end of the show in accordance with the prophecy.
Nah, man, it was all good. I enjoyed everything, and I will be doing I will stream a read through of the Ember book, like I said, hopefully this week. It is a big tome, and last time I tried to cover a big tome, it took me 3 hours plus. So I don't know if I'll be able to do it in one sitting and stay sane talking to myself for that long, but that will be coming down the line.
Oh yeah, well, I wish you the best of luck, man. That's it's over 400 pages, and most of it is just about how to make a character. I'd say 300 pages, 350 pages are how to build your character. Now that sounds horrific, but it actually walks you through. There's a method to the madness. You have a lot of options, and you don't have to go through all of them. It kind of funnels you through, and you shuck the options that you don't need until you get to where you get to a final product there. And then about 50 pages is rules, and then you have reference materials in the very back. So,
speaking of that, I don't think you covered it, but are you doing your regular old class system? Are you, a lot of multi-classic stuff? Are you doing class lists, skills, anything? What is the character gen as far as that goes?
As far as the the classes go, you have your standard classes because I like them. I think that the old archetypes, warrior, wizard, rogue, and priest, are pretty well all-encompassing. You get all your archetypes there, and you have subclasses of those that you can break into, like the fighter. You have your paladin and your ranger, and there's nothing really horribly groundbreaking in that area, except for the Arcanist. And that is listed as an optional set of rules that supersede your normal magic user. Now, with classes, with skills, I went crazy. There are something like 200 skills that you can pick from, and then you have a set of backgrounds, over 50 of those. And you are not going to have all these on character. You have more choice than you probably know what to do with, and that's what, again, I wanted. Sometimes there is no best way. I don't want there to be a best way. I want you to have fun trying to find your best way while you do this. For me, as long as you don't devolve into analysis paralysis, I think you're going to be fine.
That's good stuff. I think these standard old school archetypes work fine. Do you allow multi-classing and doing that sort of thing, or do you stick to, you kind of pick your class and settle with it for that character's run?
Well, in the basic book right now, it does not discuss multi-classing or dual classing. Although at my table I allow you to do this. I also allow anybody to dual class or multi-class. It's not restricted to a set of specific races. So if you want to start with 2 classes and run them concurrently, or 3 classes and run them concurrently, well, good leveling up there, buddy. But sure, you're going to be able to do that. If you want to quit being what you are and pick up something else, hey, start over at level 1 and just lay into it. That's absolutely great. These are things that, again, they're at my table right now, and they're going to be expounded upon in a lore master's guide that I am working on. And that is either going to wind up being an encyclopedia or a pamphlet. I'm not really sure how I want to lay that out yet. And I'm always interested in new ideas, and any advice anyone has, hey, I love ideas. Throw them at me.
I had a lot of fun with Fighter Mage Thieves back in the day, though. Yeah, they advanced super slowly, but I got a kick out of those.
Well, yeah, you want to have a character that can do everything. So you make a character that can do everything, and then you realize that just regular rogue over there, he's level 8 now. Well, what level are you? 3, and that's because I'm 111, and I haven't dinged yet. I've seen these kinds of fun things happen.
There's no such thing as too many ideas. That's true. Though sometimes you got to pare them down or focus and save some for the next book. Otherwise, you can get weighted down in the never-ending buffet of choice.
The never-ending buffet of choice. Now, there is a phrase that I wish I had heard years ago.
Feel free to use it.
Thank you. I shall shamelessly swipe it. I'm sorry?
Nicely turned.
Anybody else have anything in the chat?
Lordy.
Yeah, I mean, I come up against that all the time. I feel like I think I've heard of this as an obstacle, and it comes up as an obstacle for me is when I'm trying to finish one thing is when I start getting all the great ideas for the next thing, and I really have to try to write them down so I don't forget them, but then put them away. Otherwise, I'll never finish.
Mm-hmm.
I have an entire directory of ideas that I intend to get back to one day. It just keeps growing.
I got 2 product lines going at this point, which is probably a little nuts, but it's what I do.
Egad. Well, hey man, you're pulling it off at least, right?
Well, the one I haven't really talked about in this broadcast, it's a mechanic that I'm calling dynamic balances. I was looking at ideas of player agency and consequences of player actions driving story, driving the mechanic. Because your mechanic reinforces the behavior you are trying to model at the table. If the mechanic isn't modeling the kind of behavior you're looking for, you need to fix your mechanic.
Exactly.
So I got to thinking about this fundamental design idea and came up with the idea of dynamic balances. There are no attributes. Instead, you have sliding scales, and you get pushed up and down them according to what you do. Right now, it's in Patreon. I did post a link to it. It's looking like it's going to be a total of a 256-page book, which is a bit chunky, but this includes the entire mechanic, the game world, and a sample adventure, as well as 2 pieces of short fiction set in the game world to show how this all works. So I'm trying to make it comprehensive and keep it down to a very low crunch system, and that is primarily story driven and narration. Very major departure mechanically. What I've been doing with 1879, which is using the core step mechanic, which we inherited from Earthdawn, and it's pretty crunchy.
Are you have you play tested it yet? Because it sounds really interesting. I'm curious how it works in play.
I am not quite to the point of being ready to play test it. I'm still finishing up a couple of things on the magic system, and I need to get the sample adventure finished. Once I need to test a number of things pretty much in one go. So I need the sample adventure and the pre-gen characters and everything all set up, ready to go. Not quite there. I'm trying to hit that maybe the end of 1st of April.
That's a pretty recent target, though, so it sounds like you're getting close.
I'm at 190 pages last I checked. There's a lot of development effort that's already gone into it. There's massive amounts of game world stuff. I'm putting out a beta compile of the PDF every week on Monday morning. And then I'm also putting out my change log and word and page count statistics tracking publicly for transparency and accountability. Since I'm running this on a Patreon, the Patreon is a minimum of $1 to get in on it. And that gets you access to the beta release, which right now has that's the manual as it stands, plus the character sheet and the full color cover image that's been workshopped for it. So it's getting really close.
Yeah, that sounds...
Risk a buck and you can see exactly how close it is.
And I'm going to have to steal that pitch. That sounds great. risk a buck, and you can see how close we get.
It's come a long way. It's developed a lot of ideas, and the mechanic is pretty solidly built at this point. I just have to get the magic stuff finished and then get the sample adventure done, and then we're going to play test.
Awesome. And if it fails and you get hurt, there's always Tiger Balm.
And that's $100 for working in that.
I paid $1 for Tiger Balm, and I'm glad I did.
What is the rule of acquisition that says win or lose is always Hyperion beetle snuff? I think we just discovered a corollary. There's always Tiger Balm.
That's right. So I guess let's wrap it up. Alan, we'll start back. Actually, no, we'll go reverse. We'll go Rob, then Andrew, then Alan. If you want to say any last bits, throw any last things into the chat and give your farewell, we'll close down this edition of the chat.
It was nice talking with you all, and good luck with Andrew. Good luck with your idea for an RPG. Hope it works out. And Alan, I hope your project also works out. And be interesting to see when that Lore Master Guide is released. And the only thing I didn't really mention about what I do is if people, I have a free copy of the rules of my rules since I've released a Majestic Waterland supplement, a basic set, and I just released a slightly modified version, adding a couple things. So I'll post a link, and if you're interested, you can download it. But that's all for now.
Thank you. And hey, play more steampunk role-playing games. There are a lot of them out there, various genres. 1879 tends to be kind of big and loud and effusive and go chasing off after all sorts of weird ideas. Victoriana is a lot more focused and gets into the horror aspects, and there's Castle Falkenstein and all sorts of other wonderful systems out there, depending upon what you want to do with it. As far as promo, see the links that I posted earlier. Blog just went live this morning. I am doing some of my line development kind of in public and putting up the proposed roster for the next set of NPC dossiers that we're going to do. We're doing another one is going to be all steampunk villain. One of them will be Dr. McShropperson. He wears a long black opera cloak and he throws around black bombs with fuses that go hiss, twirls his mustache, abuses his servants, as you expect. Tally ho, and thank you for having me on. And hey, guys, great other stuff going on here. It makes me wish I was into old school enough to appreciate it. I mean, it looks elegant, is all I can really say. Over to you.
Okay, well, I just want to start off by saying thanks to you, Todd, for having me on, and Rob, Andrew. It has been great being on the show with you. You guys are truly some good professionals here. You've been doing this a long time, and I hope to one day have the same kind of confidence and success that you're enjoying right now. I appreciate everyone who manages to come on Patreon and throw me a buck or so. And I appreciate everyone who has come to play the game and showed up today to listen to me talk and tell you why you should play it.
Well, thanks, everybody. This is Todd with Hex Press signing off. And remember, Tiger Balm. It's good for everything that ails you. Have a great rest of your Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday, if you're watching. I just want to make a last note. Andrew, I expect to see a source book on 1879 cricket and how to run it, how to play it. Character classes for cricket professionals. But that's all I have. Everybody, have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you later.